everybody. It is Romania Black, and we are on episode 17 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End, and I'm really excited to dive into this. Last episode, Cyan was having the blues because he misses his long-lived friend, the gorilla warrior, whose name is not fully known yet, and he's been really missing him, and he's been going on this quest with Frieren and the others to try to find him, and it just so happens that now he has a lead on where he is, but lo and behold, it's going to go the opposite direction of Frieren and her crew. So I don't know what to think this episode. A part of me thinks that Cyan is going to leave them because then they could go to the city and they can meet up again. But a part of me is really sad about that because I don't want Cyan to leave the group, especially after we saw how dangerous the world can be without him. So there is this like danger of, are they going to be able to forge ahead without a priest? They seem to be gathering a lot of importance in this series, but if they're going to make camp at the city and kind of like test their mage skills for whatever exam they need to, then I guess that would make sense. But I kind of don't want Cyan to leave, but then I want him to find his friends. So I'm going to be really curious to see what this series does with this. But before we start, I do have some comments I want to go over before we dive into this episode. User Paris 2005 talked about how Himmel established back in episode 2, this is in reference to episode 15 with the infamous ring, basically talking about how he established back in episode 15, or in episode 2, his knowledge of flowers. So it makes sense he knew what the blooms meant when he picked out the ring for Frieren. I'm like, okay, that all makes sense. But also, there is a fan theory apparently going around where the bracelet that Stark gives Fern, the lotus blossoms are bloomed on that one, which is a sign that the love is blossoming. It's known, it's in full bloom, it's young love, teenage puppy love, all that. But Himmel's ring to Frieren had a lotus bud, meaning that it hadn't bloomed yet, it wasn't ready. Which is the ultimate tease of being like, oh, I feel so bad for Himmel because he loved her, but a part of him knew she was not going to be able to love him back before he died. And it's like, which, you know what? That's so smart storytelling wise because it gets us invested in her going to heaven to see him. Because we're like, girl, you're finally realizing all this about what you thought about Himmel. You have to see his ghost now and share all that with him. So, and then he's going to be like, really? You waited till I was dead? But yeah, basically. So I really appreciated that. Adam Young. I really liked Adam Young's comment, which kind of relates to this point in the story that has me nervous, is that the story, back when we first started Frieren, they showed us Hyder, and Hyder was just this corrupt, drunk priest all the time, and we're like, oh, well, why was he even in the party? What good was he? And then we see the episode, we meet Cyan, and it's like, oh, they actually have a very functional purpose, and it's very important we have a priest. So the fact that Cyan could possibly be splitting off from them is terrifying to me, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But thank you, Adam, for pointing that out, because it's such a really cool storytelling thing to be happening now in Frieren. Alex Cornejo said that if you combine Stark and Fern, you could either get the couple named Stern, which I really like Stern. I think it applies well to both of them, or Fark. I honestly think that Stark would do anything that Fern tells him, so I think he'd go with Stern because that matches more. Fark to me sounds like fart, and I think Fern would just turn and walk away. She'd just be like, do this. Or as Alex Cornejo said, it's like, what the fark? And I'm like, she definitely wouldn't approve of that either. So I'll stick to Stern personally. Now I'm afraid I'm just going to call Stark Stern the entire series. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Alessi Colley talked about the translation of some of the German words. Laub means foliage, like the Laub Hills is foliage. The city of Vorg is a city of previous, past, or last, which is interesting. Lord Orden is Lord Metal. The Klee region is the Clover region, which I think I've heard something called Klee before and it meant clover, so that's interesting. Wirt means host or landlord. Gable is fork, and Moot is bravery. I like that the one son that is the one that's kind of like the Stark comparison, his name means bravery. And I'm like, I love that. I think that's so sweet. So thank you, Alessi, for that. And then finally, Christopher Peterson made this joke saying, like, is it a plot contrivance that Stark just happened to run into distant relatives, that just so happened to need a body double, that just so happened to be while they were doing construction before they could open it up and convince the masses, and it just so happened to work out to be a moment that works to the advantage of Stark and the others? And you know what? Yeah, you could view it as a plot contrivance. Sure. A big coincidence. Sure. But I commented to Christopher Peterson, I'm like, how many anime and manga have we watched where it's been like, oh, the main character of this story just happens to be the savior of all humanity? It's like, I think if we can make caveats for those type of series, we can make a slight caveat for this one. I think it'll be fine. But yeah, I'm super excited to dive into this. I'm really excited. I hope you all enjoy, but we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive right into Frieren Beyond Journey's End and see what we get. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Dang, right? Man, I can't predict this show, right? I can't predict where it's going to go because I had a feeling that Cyan was probably going to leave the group, but it was going to be really bittersweet because I'm like, well, they're like, oh, we'll just, we'll take the night and then we'll think about it. And then you can decide in the morning. And then suddenly there's a blizzard and they're stuck together for a month. And we'll talk about that in this, but something that Frieren does really good in this episode, and it's been doing all season, is the concept of the split episode, where half of the episode does one storyline, half of it does the other. And again, I have seen so many little shows, mainly though those are comedy shows like Attack on Titan Junior High or Bungo Stray Dogs 1, or little chibi series where they're little vignettes. So it does kind of feel like you don't really have enough time to soak in and be a part of one storyline. Here, it does feel like that. It feels like you have the time to devote to a storyline, but then this series does not stretch it out. There's no filler. There's no like making it all just drag. It's like, nope, we've done the thing. You've got the emotional beat that you need. We've done the theme. Let's move on to something else and talk about it. And it's done really well. On paper, you would think, are they going to rush through this? But when you actually see it happen in real time, it feels fleshed out, which is really, really cool. So yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that Cyan wanted to go find his gorilla man. Can you? I'm like, I don't blame him at all. And we'll talk about this and kind of how Frieren's like, yeah, go get your man, But I was surprised that they ended up getting some more time together, even though they kind of wasted it. And then I was even more surprised that we spent the latter half of this episode kind of developing Frieren and Stark's relationship and taking care of Fern, right? So I really like the dynamic between all of our characters, but I want to go through this. There were several little moments that I was like, oh, that's reminding me of something else. And there just wasn't time to expand upon it, right? But yeah. And so Cyan is, like, what do we do? I don't know what to do with I want to go find my friend, but it's like totally off the beaten path. It seems like when they get to Offen, they've gotten from Roar to Offen, and Offen is like, this is the fork in the road. We either turn left and we go to the city that looks like Awburst, but it's not. And I'm not going to say its name because I can't pronounce it well. Or you go north and go to Tur. And Cyan's like going to go to Tur, and the others are going to go to the city. So it's like that fork in the road. There we go. And there's the trading mountains up there. It's a long ways east. But then we get that damn statue of Kraft and his priestly lover. But the thing about it is, I feel like Frieren's like, look, no. She's like, I'm spending almost 100 years chasing the footprints of a man that I let go without being able to tell him how I felt about him. She's like, the last thing I'm going to do is let you go with us and not go tell Gorilla Man how you feel about him. She's like, no, I'm not going to let you live and have regrets like I am, so you just need to go. So I totally think that Frieren absolutely understands what Cyan is feeling. Am I shipping Cyan with Gorilla Man? Probably. Can he be our bisexual king? Why not? So we'll just see, right? We'll see. I hopefully want to see Cyan find the Gorilla Warrior, but I don't know if we're going to see it this season or not. It'd be cool to see it down the road if we don't see it this season, because I'm hoping we get a second season with this series. But yeah, Frieren knows exactly what's going on. And they're like, well, can we wait till tomorrow to make a decision? And I like that Freeman's like, well, yeah, it's not like we're going to be stuck here. And then they are. Now, the OP, I started to watch it, and then there were suddenly images of characters I didn't know, and I was like, we're going to stop right now. So I'm probably going to avoid the OP, or at least looking at it, until we get a few more episodes in. I'm glad I forgot we were getting a new OP. I had kind of resigned myself to the idea that we weren't, but it does feel in the weirdest way like we're technically it's 28 episodes this season. We only have 11 episodes, but that's enough to make a core. So this feels like a new core of episodes, which makes the OP seem warranted. I don't know, there was a shot of Frieren like distancing herself from Stark and Fern at the end, and part of me was like, does that mean that Frieren and Stark and Fern are gonna get separated? I don't want that. So we'll wait and see what we get, right? We'll wait and see what we get. But this episode being called Take Care, I'm so spoiled, because now every time I see Frieren with a grimoire as she's sitting there reading, I just picture her, it's the filthiest smut. It's just like the most erotic yaoi possible. It's just like garbage. It's just like Omegaverse. It's just like the filthiest stuff you've ever read. And then she's just sitting by the fire, just casually reading it like it's nothing. Because she looks so innocent there. It's like, and then I feel like I imagine Frieren is like when you're at work and somebody sends you a not safe for work Discord picture, and you're like, do I look in the middle of this board meeting? Yes is the answer. But I just love it. And I love that Cyan goes and gets the firewood, and Fern is always in charge of getting the ingredients. Fern is very cold-natured. I feel for Fern. I struggle the same thing that Fern does. My hands get cold very easily. Poor circulation. And so they always get cold. And so I feel like my hands are the first thing that I like want to go warm up, right? And I feel like Fern and Stark are they're getting a little bit bigger because time is passing, and Frieren stays the same little cute elven, like, petite height. But I'm like, girl, I'm with Cyan. Just date already. It's like they're holding hands, they're touching each other's cheek, they're experiencing puberty. I'm with Cyan. He's like, God damn these kids and their emerging sexual emotions. Like, just date and get it over with. Get on with it. I'm with Cyan on that regard. But if shonen has taught me anything, it's usually if characters get into a relationship, they are strung apart or bad things happen to them. So maybe Frieren will subvert that. That'd be great. But I have a feeling that they're not going to get together until the end of the series, because it's a frustrating anime and we can't have sexual relations with characters and have a continuing plot narrative. Who does that? So, what can we do? But yeah, Stark is such a great guy. I'm like, Fern, girl, I feel you. I'm kind of a prude too. But Stark is such a nice guy. Like, just give him a chance. He's trying his best. And Cyan knows, right? But they're like, do we need to wait for winter to pass again? And I like that Frieren is like, look, Fern, we cannot mess with the weather. We can deal with monsters. We can use magic against those. We can't use magic against pneumonia. So let's just sit out and see how long it takes. And then the one guy says it's going to be a month while they're stuck there. So that's kind of what it reminded me of. Was there is an episode of Doctor Who. It's in like the 12th season. It's with the 12th Doctor. And the 12th Doctor has a companion that they're stuck with in a certain place for a day. And it's very bittersweet at first, because he's like, I only get to spend one night with you. And she's like, and the girl who, is kind of a romantic interest, she's like, how long is a night here? Because we're on another planet. And he's like 365 days. Or he's like 3 years. Like one night in this one world is like 3 years. And so she's like, oh, and it's like the most romantic thing ever. I love it. It's just like, yes. So time, they get one night together, but it ends up being extended and it becomes more time than they had bargained for. And it's like, so yes, I love that. But yeah, so basically they're stuck there for a month until the cold wave passes. And honestly, like, Frieren's so excited. Frieren is like, she's having the time of her life. She's like, there's a sketchy old man in a shop. He's got some good old books. I'm going to have a fun time reading those and getting those extra spells. I do agree, though, the spells she does manage to get are ones that are like legendary level. They're ones that like get rid of mold and remove tough oil stains. Hey, don't be dissing those spells. I would do a lot for those. I like that this series takes like this super OP character like Frieren and makes her focus on something that would seem so mundane. But again, part of the story with her is that she is getting to appreciate the little things in life. She's a larger than life character that's appreciating the little things thanks to her love that she has lost. So I really like that. But yeah, the little old man in the shop, he kind of looks like somebody you'd see in Legend of Zelda that would give you a potion. I like that Stark is just not the most convenience like spells that Fern is spoiled on. Stark's like, I just don't understand. Seems like something a grandma would do, and Freeman's like, shut up. So they wait it out, and to make sure that they don't die in the northern lands a little while longer together. And meanwhile, we have Frieren. Frieren is like touring that bookshelf in that old man's shop. She's like, give me the smuttiest thing you got. And he's like, well, I got this. And she's like, it will do. And meanwhile, you see, I was thinking too, the scene where Stark is like doing the push-ups in front of Fern as she's reading. One, no wonder Fern is like just sexually frustrated because there's a hot young man doing push-ups right in front of her. She's just like, just don't pay attention to him. So there's that. But then the other thing it reminded me of, in the scene, there's The Office, the character Ryan. He's kind of a douche lord. Stark is not a douche. But in the scene, like, Ryan is trying to, like, win over Mindy, this girl's affection. So he, like, starts doing push-ups in front of her. And she's just like, okay. And that reminded me of this. But Stark is infinitely better a character than Ryan. And so, yeah, then they're like walking together, gathering all the groceries. Stark's helping her. It's really sweet. And then Frieren, she tried to get to the Mega Yowie and just ended up having all the books collapse on her. I like this old man's like, how much smut this girl gonna read? Frieren's smutty adventures. What can we do? And then they're like, oh, well, it won't be long till you continue on your journey. And Cyan's like, yeah, you're right. And the thing about it is, he's like, oh, shit, time went by so fast. We didn't really get to hang out together. And that's just how it goes. Like, it goes by in the blink of an eye. I like that they acknowledge how quickly time passes in this world. But yeah, so Frieren's like, look, I need you to be a mediator. They're fighting. Can you help? And I feel like Frieren asking for Cyan's help was for her to, I think Frieren has known that Cyan was going to leave, and she's like, hey, before you go, I need you to tell me and Stark and Fern what to do. So if we have these issues, we can settle this without having to bring you and your love advice in. The thing that gets me is that Fern is the one that's frustrated. Fern is the romantically, sexually frustrated person in this. And Stark is the one that's like, yeah, it's my fault. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, dude, you don't even know. So I love how at the beginning of this, I was like, oh, Fern doesn't like Stark at all. And now I'm like, no, she has the major hots for him and she does not know what to do about it. And she's embarrassed about it. And Stark's like, I'm just trying to be a guy. But he's so sweet. He admits he's wrong. Stark is like, he is quickly becoming Himmel's apostle because he is quickly becoming Jesus 2.0. The second coming of Himmel is literally Stark. And I'm like, I don't blame you, Fern. I don't blame you at all. And I like that Cyan, he's like, oh, youth, I know how you were when I was a kid. And Fern just be like, I didn't want him to touch me because that means I'll like him even more. I don't want to do. So yeah, and Stark's like, look, I just tried. She touched my cheek. And so I tried to pay her back in kind and she got upset. And I like that he's smiling there. He's just like, hey. And she's just like, shit, no. And the thing about it is, it's not the hand on her cheek that gets her. It's the fact that he's like holding her there and he's really strong. And I can understand her being kind of freaked out by the strength in his arm, being like, oh, I don't like that. But she's just like, he's really strong and doesn't know his own strength. And she's like, it scared me for a second because I didn't know if I was in danger. Cause she's a mage, so they're like glass cannons. She's like, I didn't want to break under him. You can have all the gutter mind thoughts that you want to with that phrase, but I feel for Fern because I know what she means. And Stark having to learn that he's really strong and he doesn't know his own strength, I don't think, especially when it comes to being with Fern. I'm just like, oh my God, these two, I want to ship them so bad. And I like the signs like, look, girls don't like it when you just put your hands on their faces. He's like, you have a good heart. Just apologize to her. It'll be okay. The thing is, Cyan is still like bigger than Stark there. I would love for them to see each other again down the road. I feel like it's going to be a while. I feel like after this episode, Cyan is going to be gone for some time, and Stark and Fern are going to grow up even more. Maybe they'll be dating by the time he gets back, and he'll be like, oh, well, glad we got that taken care of. And we'll have dealt with it then. But I feel like Stark is going to get to be where he's bigger than Cyan, which is really cool. But he's like, you're good at heart. You're not like me. He's like, you'll do the right thing. Just make up and communicate with her. I'm not going to be able to mediate for you forever. So just apologize to her and tell you how you feel, and it'll be fine. And I like that Fern's like, I'm just being stubborn. It's my fault. She's like, the army used to restrain my shoulder was so strong when it scared me. And Cyan's like, oh my God. He's like, just make up to them. And then they apologize. And then he's like, I love that they go back to the pub. And he's like, just start dating already. I love he's just sitting there drinking it off. And Frieren's just like, I hear ya. I'm not sure what's happening, but are you leaving me with these kids? Maybe it's a better thing that Frieren is not as she's kind of oblivious. She's not as onto it, because otherwise she might be kind of weirded out the whole time. But Cyan says, you keep treating me like a kid. And she's like, well, you are one. I kind of like that. She's like, you kind of are a kid. According to Frieren, everybody's kind of a child in her eyes compared to her age. And that's when Cyan says, why did you invite me to travel with you? And she's like, because you reminded me like me. Before Himmel found me, I was kind of just being a hermit, and I was avoiding the Demon King, and Himmel gave me a reason to travel with him. And the idea that he's like, take my hand, and like he reaches out to her, we get a little bit more and more with each of that scene. We get a little bit more played out, and he's just like, take my hand. And he's like, I'll be the reason to go on a journey. And I'm like, shut the frick up, Himmel. Why is he so perfect? Like, Stark is like the younger version of that, but Stark has his little imperfections and his little quirks, and he's still young. He's still learning. Himmel is like fully fleshed out. He isn't his perfect form, like in Frieren's mind. And I'm like, Himmel is freaking perfection. Girl, why did you not get on that? Why you waited till he was ancient, and then you didn't realize, and then he died, and now you realize, ah! It's so frustrating. Someone in the comments described it as Jack and Rose and their fate in Titanic, and then you have to work backwards. And it's like, yeah, it sucks. It's like, it's just like, he's so freaking perfect. And it's just like, and I guess you could view his vanity as being his only drawback, but seriously. She's like, they taught me the joy of spending time with friends. She's like, haven't you had fun? And he's like, yeah, this has been fun. But I like that both Guerrilla Warrior, Frieren, Hyder, all these people are talking about Himmel the hero and becoming like him. And I like that he's like, okay, I've had my fun. I've met Frieren. Now I want to go find the guy that he's my Himmel. The Guerrilla Warrior is Cyan's Himmel, just like Stark is Fern's Himmel. Himmel is Frieren's Himmel. So yeah, then they just leave. And it's one thing that Frieren does really well as a series is it's not this big, like in any other shonen, it would have been this big drawn out, like half an episode. There have been the orchestra swelling. There have been like explosions of figurative confetti, and like everything would be swirling around them. It'd be this big fanfare. And here it's just, okay, we'll see ya. Maybe down the road, you go find who you gotta need to, and you can always come back and find us after that. And Frieren's like, he's an adult. We don't need to make a big fanfare of it. I'm like, just floored. Just absolutely floored. And even Stark's kind of like, well, that was a quick goodbye. And she's like, unlike you two, he's an adult. And maybe I don't know if that's like a meta way of poking at shonen series where the protagonists are teenagers. Maybe that's like Frieren's way of kind of poking at that trope. That's so interesting to me. But then he's like, yeah, he keeps going his way to go find. My thing is, he's traveling alone, right? He has like no knapsack, no food. Like what's he going to do? Just, I guess he'll be all right. I guess he's like Kraft at this point where he's just traveling and it's okay. Maybe since he's gone, Kraft will find his way back into the party. I don't know. Apparently 4 is the most we can have, but so then I love that Stark is gathering up his fish and mushrooms and all that. They eat a lot of fungi in this world, but it's kind of like Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. It's like, what else can you make? The funny thing here is we get a couple things. At first, I'm not going to lie, I thought for a hot second that maybe that Frieren and Fern had a spell cast on them again like before and it fell asleep. And I was like, well, that was short-lived. We didn't get 10 feet before needing that priest again, but that's not it. One, Fern, it becomes very clear in this episode the kind of anchor that Fern is for the group, because without Fern, who's gonna wake Frieren up? So Frieren would gladly be like a cat and sleep for 20 hours a day if she could, but Fern gets her up and gets her moving. But when Fern gets sick, then everything kind of comes to a standstill. So even though Fern gets kind of upset and, gets on to Frieren for treating her kind of, in her mind, like a child, it's very apparent that Fern is like a big hinge in the group dynamic. But look at Stark. Look at Stark making the soup and being all awesome. Look at him. And then he's like, something's going on. And I like that he uses his hand to wake Frieren up, and she's like, So we established that all is not for naught. I was really worried when Cyan left that our crew was going to be screwed. He did leave notes for Frieren, which is great. And I like that she kind of does her own little version of WebMD where she's like, I can't diagnose everything, but simple stuff I can diagnose. She finds out Fern has a cold and that's her thing. I'm like, that's really clever. And I like it. I like it's her establishing that how has Frieren lasted all these years without a priest around her? Well, she knows basic things. Not enough to save her from major things, but basic things she knows pretty well. And so I like that she kind of diagnoses it and figures out what they need to get. And she has the book. Stark kind of calls out for a second, that she doesn't have the power of the goddess and that she's not a priest. And Frieren is... I'm amazed Frieren doesn't go into more detail with that, but I keep thinking they're going to tie back to that spirituality at some point, but it is what it is. And then I love that she was using the diagnosis book as a soup. As a soup, a little stand. I'm like, of course Frieren would. Of course she would. So they managed it. They're like, okay, we have to come find... Let's go someplace we can get outside the cold. They find a nearby village. There's a very weird obsession in this episode with zooming in on the person milking the udders. It's so weird. I was like, I don't know why they needed to zoom in. They zoom in on the person. They could have just had the shot of them with the cow, but they zoom in on them udders close up. And then they do as Stark. They zoom in on him milking the udders. I was like, is this something sexual? Is this something weird? Is this someone's fetish? What is this? It's very odd. Growing up around cows, I'm like, there is nothing appealing about an udder. I don't know. I've grown up with cows my whole life. I'm like, there's some weird fetish. I say weird. Y'all like what you like. I can't call it weird. To me, it's a little out there. The whole obsession with some people are with udders and things like that. I ain't gonna speak to your kink right now, but to each their own. It's just to me an odd fascination. I mean, I get it. It's the boobs of the cow, but we're going to stop talking about this and move on. It's just a weird angle to focus on. I'm just saying. I love that this country bumpkin let them in and they're like, fine, I guess. And Stark's nice enough to help out, right? But this scene here where Frieren is getting a hold of Fern's hand and holding it. And she wants to go find an icicle cherry blossom to get those big ass mushrooms. They're like morels on steroids. And she's sitting there holding Fern's hand. And she's like, I'm holding her hand since we arrived. She seems to be in pain. And when Fern has a cold, holding her hand makes her feel better. So, again, we talked a little bit several episodes ago about how Frieren, there's the question of, is it an elven thing? Is she neurodivergent? Are all elves neurodivergent? How does that go? But for Frieren, I feel like this is kind of a tie to that neurodivergency in that she just knows that when Himmel held her hand, it made her feel better. And Fern, when she was sick and Frieren held her hand, it made her feel better. So she thinks it's a universal, I'll hold your hand. And the thing about it is when Himmel holds her hand, he holds it like a lover would hold it. He holds it like someone's holding hands, you know, like this. Here, Frieren's just like holding the hand very platonically and like, I don't know what to do with this hand, so I'm just going to hold it like I would a burrito. And that's it. Which you could say that means that Frieren and Fern have nothing there, which she's known Fern since she was a kid, so of course not. But I like that when Himmel holds her hand, he holds it like a lover would hold a hand, like a dainty lady being held by her gentleman. And Stephen Stark's like, I thought for a second she was going to have Stark hold the hand, but then Fern goes, quit treating me like a child. And she's like, okay, yeah, you're right. And they go off to go look for the mushroom. Frieren is interesting in this episode because she's kind of reminiscing and talking about how Fern has grown up. And she's like, I'm used to Fern being this little kid, and now she's this full-blown adult. She's only a couple of years from being an adult. And she's like, time moves in the blink of an eye. And she's like, I always think of her as a kid. And if you think about it, Frieren's been alone most of her life. She had Flom and she had the party, but she's never been around someone growing up, right? We don't know when Flom died if Frieren was around her all of her life until she aged out. We don't know if she died of old age. We don't know if she died of something else. We're not exactly sure on that, unless it was said in a previous episode and I forgot about it. But she's never witnessed someone age. Not really. She wasn't around Himmel when he aged. She pieced out for 50 years and came back, and then he'd already aged. So she missed out on that. And she's seen Himmel and Eisen older, or Hader and Eisen older, but she didn't see them actually age. She missed out on that moment. So for her, watching Fern grow up, but still acknowledging her as a child, makes sense. And Stark's just like, that's so interesting. And so, yeah, I love they see the turtle again. The little turtle that has the flora and fauna on it. Super cute. And then they find the icicle cherry blossom, which is so beautiful. It is gorgeous. With the moment she said its flowers were poisonous, though, I kept thinking like one would hit Stark and he'd pass out, and then that would be the joke. But no, they don't make a joke out of it. But it is cool that we see this beautiful tree. And he's like, why did you hold Fern's hand? And she's like, I wasn't trying to treat her like a child, but it's the only way I know to relieve someone. What should I have done? And then Stark's like, well, I guess you just have to do what you want to do. That's what Eisen told me. People need emotional support, and no one dislikes receiving that support. And it's like, yeah, that's so true. I mean, we often think that, we have to watch over kids and stuff when they're sick, but adults need just the same amount of support when they don't feel well at all. Now I'm back to the scene with Himmel, and I guess Himmel is holding Frieren's hand like a burrito and not so much like a lover, but he kind of is. He's being respectful, but she looks so pretty there with her hair down. She's like, what do you think you're doing? And he's like, well, you were moaning in your sleep, so we feel helpless when we're sick. And so I lost my mother when I was young, but she used to hold my hand like this. And that's when she says, well, do you think that I'm like a child? And he's like, no, it's not just children who need emotional support. I was like, look at Frieren teaching us these life lessons. Look at that. Isn't that something? I freaking love this show. And it's done so like we learn a life lesson while also getting romantic shippable moments with this dead man and the immortal elf. And then, of course, Himmel's been Jesus this entire time, but we can't let him get away with it too much. So he's like, well, I'm handsome when I'm being considerate, aren't we? And she's like, okay, that's enough. Just had to take it too far, Himmel. Just had to. And then I love that Hyder and Eisen show up. They're like, we've been making out in the woods, but we also found mushrooms to heal you, Frieren. My ships are thriving in this episode, and I'm kind of here for it. And then I like that Frieren thanks him for reminding her of Eisen's words. And she's like, I'll hold your hand when you're sick. And he's like, you don't have to do that. He's like, tell Fern to do it instead. So yeah, these really adorable, giant-ass mushrooms. And I love that Frieren's like a little witch with her cauldron. She looks like Winifred Sanders from Hocus Pocus, mixing up the green batter, the green batch. And then she feeds it to Fern. I'm just waiting. I was waiting for Fern to be like, that tastes awful. And then, yeah, we have this weird close-up of Stark milking the cows. And she's like, I'm going to hold your hand until you feel better. And Fern's like, I'm not a child anymore. And Frieren says, I know, but I'm still going to hold it till you feel better. So cute. So cute. And then they leave, and I like that Fern and Stark have that little moment chatting about how Fern looks better, and then they move on their way. Now, I do like the ED with the new visuals. The ED with the new visuals and the little, like, claymation with the Frieren statue going up to get the blue flower. It's super cute. The only thing that's a little concerning is we see, like, a grave on a hill, and so I don't know if that's supposed to be Himmel's grave, if it's supposed to be Flom's grave, because at the very end she's with Fern. I was like, I don't think that Edie is hinting that Fern's gonna die, so it must be Flom or Himmel's. But yeah, this episode was super cute. It's so crazy. I think that they do it intentionally because on the surface I was feeling really bad that Cyan was leaving. We just got to know him. I feel like we just met him and he's already gone. But in the same vein, the other part of the episode, like, literally holds your hand, just like Himmel held Frieren's hand and Frieren held Fern's hand. And the show literally holds your hand and goes, it's going to be okay. We can let Cyan go and we're going to be all right. And I'm like, damn it, show. Getting all up in my feels. So I'm sad that Cyan's gone for now. I hope he comes back when he finds his friend from 10 years ago and they have their high school reunion. I hope he comes back. But I have a feeling we're about to go to that big city, take whatever this exam is, and hopefully probably meet the characters that are in the OP that I try not to pay attention to, and go from there. So, yeah. I'm super excited for next episode. I hope you all are too, but we're not going to waste any more time. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Frieren Beyond Journey's End.